Murphy's Law, well, it's alive and well. A day ago, there was a plumbing leak in the library, a major plumbing leak. And Shatika Wilson was wonderful. She said, we're going to work around it, work through it. We'll move from the second floor to the third floor. It'll all be good. Well, that's exactly what we did, but the move was this morning, so it was busy and hectic. So bear with us. The other thing is that some of you did not get to sign in, so we will have a sign-in sheet for you. And what we'll do is in the session, we'll make sure that you get your signatures on so that some of you need it for your professional development, particularly if you're a teacher in a parish that wants it. We don't want you to be shortchanged in that. So that's it. Hope you've enjoyed the rolls and the coffee. I see a whole lot more left. We can have a few extra calories. Let's have some more rolls of coffee, okay? With no further ado, look at your packets. You should have in your packets a pencil or a pen, the agenda, the things that you'll be seeing, and it's up to you to select which session. Each room is equipped with about 40 chairs, 45 chairs. After that, you have to pick another session. All the sessions are exciting, they're interesting, they're pertinent, they're what we need to know and hear about in today's time. We are blessed to have a very special person here with us, Reverend Dwight Webster, who's been one of us for many, many years, earned his PhD after he was here for a while with me. And I can't think of any other person that can bring the message of education, parents, children, and God together as our Reverend Webster can. So with no further ado, let us greet Reverend Dwight Webster with his invocation.
Thank you, Dr. King. I'm not sure where you come from. Some of you I know have come from the West Bank, some from Metairie, some from the East. And who knows what it is that you left when you came here, what you had to go through to get up and get here, to be dressed and clothed and in your right mind. So this is a moment of meditation that I want you to do. Fix and fasten in your mind the image of one child, your child, one of your students, a neighborhood child. I want you to bow your heads, close your eyes. I want you to think of that one child. Now, some of y'all may have bunches of children, but at least one child. Get in your mind a good and positive thought, a healthy outcome for that one child. Whether you're the parent or not, you will be a parent today spiritually. Let us pray. If it had not been the Lord on our side, where would we be? If it is true that the children are our future, the preparation and inspiration of parents must be paramount. Thank you for Modern Parents magazine and its luminary leadership. Thank you for the U.S. Department of Education and its sponsorship. Thank you for the Southern University at New Orleans, its chancellor, students, and staffs, and their commitment to the community and educational excellence. Bless this effort, we pray, this day and forevermore. And all the people said amen. Amen. Ashe. Hotep. Thank God.
At this time, I'd also like to introduce, she's not on the agenda, but I think she needs to be shown a round of applause, is Carol Alexander Lewis.
Good morning, everyone. Well, I am scheduled to appear a little further down on your agenda to introduce the wonderful steering committee that has worked with us so tirelessly over this several months of preparation for this event. I'd like to just thank everyone who is present on today. I'd like to thank everyone who was involved with having a wonderful event for us on today. I don't want to belabor the greeting. Just want to say thank you. We appreciate you. And I hope you guys have a wonderful and very informed and powerful meeting today.
At this time, once again, I'd like to introduce our Chancellor at Southern University of New Orleans, Dr. Lisa Mims Devizan.
Good morning.
Good morning.
And no, I am not Dr. Suzanne Mayo Thetis. This morning I had a couple of students to come up to me, and they were very, very astute. And they said, we're in your online class. I said, you're in my online class? I'm not teaching online this semester. They said, yes, you are. And they were kind of puzzled. And I said, are you talking about Suzanne Mayo Thetis? And they said, you look just like her. I said, well, she's a good-looking lady. Will the students of Southern University at New Orleans please stand? Will the faculty and staff of Southern University of New Orleans please stand? And now I'd like any alumni of Southern University at New Orleans to please stand. And although I am here to do the welcome, there's a reason for my asking or requesting of each of those groups to stand. When we talk about educating the whole child, for those of us in our education classes, you may have heard the term synergistic. When you educate the mind of an individual, you are utilizing a synergistic approach where the whole is greater than the sum of the parts, but it takes those parts to complete that whole. When I look over here to my right at little Mr. Ronnie and Miss China, that is our future. Look to them, embrace them, and know this is a part of your job. This is a part of my job. This is a part of our job together. And let me talk about togetherness. For those of you who don't know, at Southern University at New Orleans, we've embraced a new motto. And it is, at SUNO, we are a team. And you'll hear me speak of this later in the session. But team for Southern University at New Orleans means togetherness empowers all mechanisms.
All right now. Yes.
And although I said I was only supposed to be here for the welcome, there are some things that I would like to say. Let me tell you about who and what Southern University at New Orleans really is. Southern University at New Orleans is a staple, not just for this community, but it is a staple for the world. For it is at Southern University at New Orleans that Southern University had its founding. And if you don't know, you better ask somebody. Here at Southern University at New Orleans, we produce great leaders. And if you don't know, you better look to Miss Leslie Allison. Where are you, Leslie? Reverend Webster. Petit. And yes.
Charlie Johnson, renowned.
Look, I saw him sitting there. Charlie Johnson. And yes, even myself, the 8th Chancellor of Southern University at New Orleans, and the first alumnus. 8 Reverend Webster, I'm not going to profess to be a well-versed person when it comes to inspiration and knowledge and biblical philosophy. But time and time again, they kept asking me, do you know what this number 8 symbolizes? And they said it symbolizes new beginnings. And I said, well, guess what? My life must be full of new beginnings. Because not only am I the 8th chancellor, but my birthday is 8/8. But back to what I started saying. When you see and know a person who is involved with Southern University at New Orleans, you know an individual, in spite of where they come from and who they are continuously striving for excellence. And it never ceases. When you know about Southern University at New Orleans, do you know that right here from this institution, we have produced more educators, more politicians, more representatives of any fashion. But most importantly, we produce youth. Tell Southern University at New Orleans' story. Don't consider SUNO a best-kept secret. There are no secrets in life. Tell it. Tell people when they come to you that at Southern University at New Orleans, SUNO educates over 60% of the population of your non-traditional students. It affords them an opportunity to attain a degree when many other institutions do not offer what they need in the forms of evening, weekend, and online courses. Tell them right here from this institution, you have leaders who engage and interact with professional organizations and societies so that you are afforded the same information that we have. Tell them that right here at 6400 Crest Drive, you have 2 presidential award winners sitting on this campus, one under President George W. Bush and one under President Barack Obama. When you talk about Southern University at New Orleans, tell them that the granddaughter of Katherine Johnson, the Hidden Figures, is an alumna of Southern University at New Orleans. Tell them that one of the 2 first African-American topographers for NASA is a graduate of Southern University at New Orleans, Dr. Garland Green. Tell them that Aretha Castle Haley, who was a strong and staunch historical figure, an advocate for social justice empowerment, and a civics engagement leader, and an advocate and a civil rights person, held right here from Southern University at New Orleans. When you talk about pioneers, the first African-American dean of the law school of the University of Mississippi is a Southern University at New Orleans alum, Dean Louis Westerfield, who was also dean at Loyola. So, yes, I was supposed to come with just a welcome, but I want to bring that welcome to historical context and figures and know that you are a part of greatness. Don't ever underestimate your ability, your power, and your wherewithal. Because here at SUNO, we don't stand behind you, we stand with you. And know that you, as well as I, we are here to change minds, attitudes, and the world. Continue with what you're doing. We know there are struggles in education. We know the pay is low. We know there are many problems. But if your voice is not heard, silence means submission. Do not walk away from here silent. know that you have power. And together, in the words of the late Maya Angelou, still we rise. So thank you and welcome.
Wow. Yes, another round for that. At this time, it gives me great pleasure to introduce Mr. John Brown, who is the District 1 President of Orleans Parish School Board. And I want to share with you, and he probably knows this, but the superintendent, both superintendents of Orleans Parish and of the other system, Patrick Dobart and the other name, I just forgot it, are alumni of SUNO as well. So, John Brown, welcome.
Good morning, good morning. Wow, I had to follow Chancellor after that, I'm telling you. And some other very dynamic people, including Reverend Webster this morning. Good seeing all of you. Good morning, everyone. Good morning. And I bring you greetings from Orleans Parish School Board. And I'm really, really happy to be here. There's probably nothing more important than our children and educating our children. And having a parent forum such as this is critical for what we do in Orleans Parish schools and in all schools, whether they be public, private, parochial, or elsewhere, homeschooling, or whatever. It's important. So I'm happy to be here at Parent Forum, and I'm happy to see turnout such as this. But I would say that we should have, for Parent Forum, for empowering parents and educators, we should have Superdome full. And Carol, I challenge us to increase the number of parents and grandparents that we get out to these kinds of forums to empower them, to help them to do the good work that must be done for our children. Let me just see the show of hands. I know I saw the students. Good representation of students here. Where are parents? Any parents? And it could be students and parents. Good. Parents? Thank you. Grandparents and grandparents. If we have grandparents, I always recognize thank you. Our grandparents, thank you. We need to have many, many more, and we need to help you to notify parents and grandparents the importance of being empowered, to get them out, to understand more. But I'm happy to see so many students. Let's see the educators. How many educators, those who are working educators right now, raise your hand. Thank you. Thank you for your work. Thank you for your service. That's important. I see not only some educators, where's Joyce? Is Joyce still here? Joyce is a former school leader that I've known. And Gertrude, where's Gertrude? Gertrude put many, many years in Orleans Parish School with me as an educator and principal. I was a school principal, so I'm an educator. It's important to me. And I see Monica. Where's Monica? Did she come up? Monica? Monica from St. Bernard. From where? Plaquemine. Next door. Monica. I'm sorry, Monica. Worked with Monica as a part of School Leadership Center for many, 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 many years. So I say all of that to say thank you all for all the work that you do. For all of the work that you do. There's nothing more important, believe me, there is nothing more important than what we do to educate our children. There's nothing. And I can tell you, the young lady that spoke earlier about her experience, our first grade teacher, and remembering all of that, I can only say to you briefly, I did not have the greatest experience as a first grader and second grader. I did not. But because of my mom, my grandmom who raised me, and the educators who persisted and saw something in me and continued to work with me to make me the student that I became later on in life and through junior high school and high school. I now thank them and remember them, and the mentors. And I mentioned mentors because that is most important. Most important that we have mentors for our boys and our girls. And I will continue to advocate for that. So if you are educators in school, if you are students, those are some of the things that we can do in our schools, in Orleans Parish schools, and other schools, whether they be public schools or not, to help our kids to be successful. So to all of you parents and grandparents and educators and educational leaders and students, I thank you on behalf of Orleans Parish School Board for the work that you do. And have a great day.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. Henderson Lewis would kill me. That was the other superintendent. Okay. At this time, I would like to introduce the parent welcome, Ms. Leslie Ellison, District 4.
Good morning, good morning, good morning, good morning. I am Leslie Ellison, Vice President of Orleans Parish School Board, also represent District 4, which is Algiers, the Marigny area of New Orleans. I bring you greetings from the district as well as from Algiers to say thank you. Yes, all right, Algiers, yes, all my life. To the parents, thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. To the grandparents, to those that have been perhaps not biological parents, but you have imparted into children's lives and have made a difference. Dr. Mims, if it was not for Dr. Mims, I would not have graduated from college. As an educator, she was my professor, a biology teacher. And it's
16.
and I was 12. I would not have graduated from Southern University at New Orleans if it wasn't for her. And her pushing me and having and persevering and allowing me to know that I can learn. And so I want to say to the educators as well, thank y'all. We all know that life and death is in the power of the tongue. And we want to speak life to our children. And we want to lift our children up. And we want to lift others up. And it's because of this woman, I was able to see something in me that I could not see because of what she saw and how she pushed me and pushed me and pushed me. And to this day, I probably would not even be an elected official if it wasn't for her. And how sometimes in life, what one person does, then somebody else adds to it, and someone else adds to it, and someone adds to it. And then at the end of the day, then you have a citizen, somebody that the university could be proud of, someone that the family could be proud of, someone that the community can be proud of. I always say that our daughters and our sons are daughters and sons of the community. Regardless of what they're doing in life or where they are in life. And those that are not, that have gone down the wrong path, I encourage you all, if you see someone going in a wrong path, speak life to that person. Sometimes we shake our heads and put our heads down, but speak life to them. Even if you can't verbally say it to their face, speak it into the atmosphere. Speak life to the individual. God bless you. Enjoy the conference. I believe that this is an opportunity for all to receive. During this time, I want to thank Carol Alexander Lewis for her vision in putting this on. And again, to all of y'all, enjoy your day, and I hope that you get everything that you have came for. And I know there is at least something here for each and every one of y'all. God bless you.
All these powerful words of inspiration. We can't do anything but float out of here to our sessions. At this time, I'd like to once again introduce Carol Alexander Lewis, who will go over the introduction of the steering committee. And then I'm just going to have a brief couple of logistics things to tell you about, and then we're going to go on with the session.
I'd like to take this moment to thank all of the members of the steering committee who were involved in this process. The event that we have today could not take place without the help and the vision and the dedication of all of the members of the steering committee who participated in our conference calls, who participated in in our meetings over several months. The representatives were from various parishes, and I'd like to thank them. I'd like them to stand. Thank you. We have a nice representation from St. Tammany Parish, from Plaquemines Parish, from Southern University at New Orleans, of course, from Delgado Community College, and there are a myriad of members of Southern University that I do not have time enough to thank. I just want to thank Dr. Mims Devizan for allowing her staff to provide just open arms when we approached the university about presenting a forum such as this in Louisiana. Southern has been a staple. They have partnered with us each and every time. And so I just want to publicly thank Southern University for that. I just want to thank our representative here, who we will see for lunch. She's one of the first members of the steering committee, Representative Pat Smith from Baton Rouge, Louisiana. Thank you so much for that. Representative Pat Smith is actually a member of the House Education Committee, and she served on that board with Governor John Bell Edwards before his term as governor. So she's going to come to us for lunch as our guest speaker and share some words of wisdom, and I'm very, very thankful for that. And right now, I'd just like to turn it back over to Dr. Kay, who's going to talk to us about the logistics of the day. And again, thank you.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
I'm Lisa Mims Devizan, Chancellor here at Southern University at New Orleans, also Professor of Biology.
Good morning. My name is Jamar McNeely. I'm the Chief Executive Officer of Inspire NOLA Charter Schools, which happens to be the highest performing charter management organization in New Orleans. Currently, right now, we have 3 schools educating 2,400 students in New Orleans.
Well, Mr. Neely and I were asked to have this panel discussion, Raising Achievement for African American Male Students. And before we begin, I just want to give you, Mr. Neely and I would like to give you just a couple of statistics on black male students. And this information is from Focus on Blacks, Race Against Time, Educating Black Boys. 42% of black students attend schools that are under-resourced and underperformed. Black boys are 3 times more likely to be suspended or expelled from school than their white counterparts. Now, with that being said, keep this in mind. The more time you keep a child away from the classroom, the less time they're actually attaining the knowledge that they should receive for a particular course. Black males and Hispanic males make up 80% of your student population that are in special education classes.
Black boys are 2.5 times less likely to be enrolled in gifted and talented courses in school.
And even though those black boys are 2.5 times less likely to be enrolled in there, they meet all the criteria. So it's very unfortunate that you have a set of, especially minority students, who meet the criteria, but for whatever reason, these young, impressionable minds are not given the opportunity to excel, advance, and demonstrate their capabilities in gifted courses and receive those resources for them as well as the school that they attend.
28% of core academic teachers in high minority schools lack appropriate certifications.
So imagine when you have those students who are already challenged perhaps in some form or fashion, being engaged by individuals who do not have that proper certification. Are we really helping those students, or are we serving to the detriment of those individuals?
Less than half of black male students graduate from high school on time, although many eventually complete a GED.
And
Last but not least,
when we talk about educating African American male students from the higher education or the institutional side, we have approximately 4.5 to 5 million African American males that attend college. However, by their first year, they drop out for many reasons. Therefore, half of those students do not receive the benefit of a degree. And only 11 to 15% actually complete the degree. So what are some of the problems? As educators, what can we do to overcome those obstacles? And a part of what we need to do, and we have these discussions all the time, Mr. Neely, we have to turn those obstacles into opportunities. Again, we have to turn those obstacles into opportunities. And with that, what I did, because I wanted to make sure that I didn't hit or miss any highlights of what has been observed. Now, we know, and this is a given fact, many of your homes that African American male students are in are led by whom? The mother. So with that being said, many of these young boys and young men miss that in social engagement between an adult male who can demonstrate the fundamental principles of the transition from boyhood into what? Manhood. They miss out on simple things such as how to properly tie a tie, how to respect, engage, and interact with their female counterpart, how to respect their elders. Now, we're not saying that women cannot do it, because I'm here to tell you women rule the world. But what happens in that absence of that male figure? And what are some of the reasons that these young men are not achieving? And how can we help them to achieve? Now, as Miss Ellison so politely called me out with my teaching years, like I said I was 16 when I taught her. But for decades, I have worked with educating, observing, and encouraging boys from as young as preschool into the higher institutional setting. And what I have continuously observed over decades is that while we are prescribed to different curricula that we must utilize, we have to take a vested interest in creating and implementing curriculum that's epistemologically unproblematic for the diverse learners that we serve. I know so many times we may have been given the adage, one size fits all. But when you are educating, especially African American males who may come to your classes with social, economical, familial, and even nutritional challenges, we have to unveil that mode of thinking, that one size fits all, because it does not. So therefore, as educators, we have to implement strategies that deal with us raising the achievement of African American males. And I don't want to be the sole person talking, because I don't want Mr. Neely to say, well, she was dominating this discussion. But I'm very passionate about this subject, because while my training is a professor of biology, my doctorate is in science and math education. So over the years, I've been engaged in psychology courses, in curriculum instruction and design, in consulting for Orleans Parish School Board and others. So my training is not just limited to teaching biology. And yes, for many years I've even taught teachers how to teach and design science courses that incorporate a variety of methodologies. So there are some other points that I would like to discuss that we need to establish with how we help to raise the achievement of African American males, but I'd like my colleague to chime in.
I think you were doing a wonderful job of explaining what's there. I guess for me, the aspect that I would chime in is, what does that look like in New Orleans? What does that look like in the surrounding parishes of the kids that we're educating every single day? To give you some local statistics of just what's happening in the city of New Orleans, right now, 99% of the juveniles arrested are African American. The poverty rate for our students that we're currently servicing every single day is roughly around 37% of our kids are living in poverty. The median income is roughly around $23,000 to $25,000 for a family in our city. Our charter schools, or our public schools, percentage of African American students is roughly around 99.2, based on what the city is. If you look at our crime statistics, of course, everybody's here aware of the shootings that's happening each and every day in our city. That really puts our males, but just our African American population, in a very influx situation of what's actually happening in our schools and how does that transfer. So every single day, and I'm going to speak solely of my organization, we have to reset a lot of different things that the kids are facing every single day, whether it's home, whether it's what they're seeing on technology, whether it's what they're seeing on television, whether it's what their anger inside of them is dealing with. So before we can even get to the aspect of raising achievement, we're dealing with social and emotional skills each and every single day, just to allow our youth to feel good about themselves, to even put them in a position to learn. And I think a lot of individuals miss that, where you just think, okay, especially for a city of New Orleans or a city that's similar to New Orleans and surrounding parishes, that just because a child is showing up to school, as educators or the people working with kids, we automatically think they're going to learn. That's not a reality of what we're facing today in our daily schools. So we have everything from social workers, counselors, nurses, just to provide the basic health of what our kids need, even before we get into achievement mindset of what that looks like. And a lot of that starts with changing some of the mindsets of our educators that we have in our classroom, even before the instruction begins. So for us, and then especially if I think about our high school, which is 1,100 students, if I think about our K-8 schools, which are 730 students, to even get our kids to have the ability to be in a position to learn and know that they can do great things, it's a holistic approach of everything that we have to do to put them in the right mindset before we even get into the instructional knowledge of what we're going to teach. Now, once we do that, now we can engage in a whole different way to raise the engagement up in our classroom, to actually fulfill student achievement. But achievement is not just academics. Achievement is a holistic perspective of how our students are actually growing in our schools to do great things and become better citizens for themselves. So that's kind of how we approach it. And what we're finding is it's actually working. Because right now we have a 100% graduation rate for high school. We have our ACT score that we're actually decent in the city of New Orleans, but constantly improving. We're seeing our young boys actually excel and become young men where they're actually developing their character to do some great things. But it is a struggle each and every single day, and I just want to make sure everyone's clear on that. Now we can get into strategies, we can get into techniques, different things that we do because we built out a whole game plan on just how we're going to attack it. But everybody, I think you're aware coming in that it's more than just the books to actually raise the achievement of what we're dealing with. Right?
And I'm so glad you brought up the fact about what our perceptions are. Because as Mr. Neely has stated, even prior to raising the achievement, we as educators, as parents, as the community, we have to deal with what Mark hit so eloquently on the head, removing attitudinal barriers. When we are dealing with educators, when we are dealing with interacting and engaging on day-to-day lifelong learning skills, sometimes we infuse our own perceptions, misconceptions, and naive theories of what we think that individual should have, should know, or should encounter. But in doing so, we miss the whole mindset of how do we help that individual for life, not just for educational purposes, but for life. And in doing that, we have to be reflective and engaged. Mr. Neely, as they say, it takes a village to raise a child. So therefore, when we talk about not just raising the achievement of African American males, but raising that individual up to be a productive member of society, we have to know that you need to be involved. And when I say you, I'm not saying you as just an educator. I'm saying that you in terms of myself as well. Parents, the community, the political leaders, in terms of policy. We all must take stake in what we do to invest in these individuals. Leave your own personal feelings at home. That is not our job to say what we believe the individual should do. Because part of our own naive theories and perceptions and misconceptions about these young, impressionable minds can totally devastate what it is they're to become. So when we transition and change mindsets, we're also helping to change their attitudes. Something else, Mr. Neely, that you hit upon, and it deals with the young males. And I'm saying, I'm looking at this from an educator's perspective. I know many times in many of our schools, we're told we have to follow the curriculum. We have a certain amount of time. But what we need to question is, are we really incorporating cultural awareness into what we're doing? And is that cultural diversity a part of engaging that young man, that student? Because they're only in school for a certain amount of period. But what do we do past that time frame of school? And while in school, what are we embedded into their learning process? Another aspect of our young males that I think we could utilize to help them, and not just with raising achievement, but with raising their goals, raising their objectives, raising their purposes and their destiny. We have to address the fact that all children, all young men do not learn in the same fashion. I know many times we say, oh, that's an old adage. People always talk about learning styles. Oh, I hear that learning styles are played out. No, it's not. All children can learn, but they do not learn in the same fashion. And when you incorporate different modalities, different learning styles into the process, you are therefore encouraging and promoting engagement from everyone. And these learning styles are not just for the classroom. These learning styles transition and transcend into their world experiences. So these are some other elements that we have to add to what it is we plan on doing, not just in raising the achievement level, but encouraging them to promote success for life.
I guess one thing I have, are there any questions? Because we could talk on this for a very long time, but just the practical aspect of how it's actually evolving now. Are there any questions? Yes, sir.
Quick comment. Over time, you walk down an elementary school hallway, K through 5, 90% of the teachers are female teachers. Some of the research out there says that African American males tend to do better with teachers who look like themselves, male teachers. But yet, I don't think we do a good job of recruiting males to be elementary school teachers. We recruit STEM and everything else, but we don't do a good job in recruiting men to be elementary school teachers.
So statistically, less than 2% of our workforce are African American males. So in some cases, just the amount of African American males that are actually getting the college degree or willing to become a teacher, period, is hard. What I found is there is a unique relationship, especially if the instructor knows what's going on, of how to bridge that gap. But as a former assistant principal, now my role as a chief executive officer, and I'm just going to shoot you straight and just tell you real, at this point, I don't care whether or not I'm able to hire. There is a preference that I do look for African American males, hands out, but I just need a quality instructor, period, these days to be able to understand how to get this done. Now, once I find that quality instructor, regardless of race, I can shift some mindsets and do some trainings to make sure everybody's on the same page on what our mission is, because we're a mission-driven school. But statistics will show, especially if you look at our performance holistically in education statewide, just as many African American, this is a very touchy topic, but I'm going to tell you the truth, just as many African American teachers are failing our students as everyone else that is out there. So it comes to an aspect of when you're an assistant principal or a principal and I'm staffing a school, I need the best educator, period. But if I can find an African American male whose mindset is ready to roll, and understanding that our kids are our priority and what we need to do, they definitely will have a job in our network. Yes.
I have a question regarding the parental involvement. I know that many of our African-American male fathers are not actively involved in the education process for a variety of different reasons, some of their own traumatic experience as going through the system. How can we, or what are you guys doing, especially K through 8, to get those fathers early on involved in the system to where they can really be an advocate while also learning as well, so that they can help their sons or their daughters for that matter?
That is a harsh reality that we're living with in our school, the displacement of the African American father. But just to engage, we do everything from donuts with dads to a males club to whatever we need to do to just get those fathers to be involved. But what we've also decided to do was extend it. So now it's not just fathers, it might be grandfathers, it might be brothers, it might be mentors, whoever's making that connection to be involved that can help us engage with what we need to do, we're willing to engage to make sure that we can do what we need to do. And it's been working, but it's still not to the level or the degree that we would like for it to be. For whatever reason, that's just the case. But we have decided to be creative where majority of our meetings that we do after school now, of course we're going to have dinner, we're going to have everything to make the excuses very, very limited of why you're not showing up. But we make a very special outreach to those fathers to be able to say, well, we need you to show up for not just athletic events. We need for you to be a report card conference as well, right? Or we need you to be at parent nights when we're doing things. Just don't come on Saturdays and we'll go talk to them like, I'm not seeing your report card conference, what's going on? So that's an honest conversation that we're able to have as well.
Yeah, let me just say, by way of comment also, that the impact of cultural competence of our teachers is real. You mentioned that just a little bit. I teach at an all-boys school, Smothers Academy, brand new this year. But I've taught in other districts. And I think that piece is overlooked by a lot of districts and by a lot of schools as far as how much you really have to teach your teachers how to relate to their students. For African American males, they are not going to respond to you if they feel they can't trust you. So you've got to be willing to do all of that other stuff you talked about as well, which was we've got to be social workers. We've got to be parents. We've got to be that mediator for argument purposes. We've got to be all of that before we can get to the job of being a teacher. So I think that for some teachers who have not embraced that fact and embraced that reality, they shift them off quickly as discipline problems because they don't get responded to. When as an alternative, if they would find out what's going on with that child. Sometimes I have to pull one of my kids on the side and go, okay, what's going on with you today? What's happening? Something happened before you got here. And it could be anything. But until you break that, you can't teach that child the rest of the day. So I think that that's a major, major issue in our schools today. There's a lack of cultural competence and a lack of training at that level to improve the cultural competence of the teachers, professional development or otherwise, to get them where they need to be so that they can reach the students that we're trying to get them to reach.
One thing that I find very interesting, and it happened to me as a African American male as well. One thing about the males, we're instantly gratified into the sports of what's there. So, of course, I'm going to have somebody supporting me to play basketball, supporting me to play football at every single game, making sure I'm all right, are you catching a touchdown, what's going on? That's there. I think as an educator, you can uniquely, and going back to what you said, use that competitive spirit to drive different avenues of academic success. So what we find ourselves doing is using that competitive nature to be like, okay, so I know you're doing well athletically, I understand this, but is this all you can give me academically? And you use that from a conversational piece to motivate, because majority of our students want to do well in everything. They just need for somebody as that coach would motivate them to be that coach in the classroom to build that excitement to do what they need to do. But sometimes as educators and as parents, the other thing I learned is, going back to your point, I can't get so trapped into my lesson plans and what I want to do that I miss those larger teachable moments to really pull our kids in for certain things. So if something's happening nationally, if something's happening that's affecting our city, whether it's what happened in Baton Rouge, you have to use those defined moments that has bigger emphasis in our society to just talk about it, to really hear their voice, to engage them, and then they'll look at you, well, okay, this person or this teacher really cares about me. I can relate to this person. Once you can get that student to realize that you relate, or that you believe in them, or that they can trust you, you got it. But if you always just stuck on your agenda that I want to come every single day with my lesson plans and my benchmarks and standards, and I just want to make sure I'm preparing our kids for our standardized tests, and you're missing a bigger picture, you'll never excel as high as you want to be because you missed that personal connection.
And that speaks to what we also discussed earlier about infusing cultural awareness into the educational setting, and sometimes you have to go off script. And while we understand that, you know, most teachers, you're told, look, you have to follow these standards. This is what they need for the this particular exam or that particular exam. But life is not always based on an exam. Life is based on everyday experiences. And having your friends shot in the back or killed is not a part of that lesson plan. So how do you engage those individuals who have these lifelong learning experiences happening to them today? How do you position that individual other than what's in that book? Because sometimes, as they say, prescriptions don't work. What are you doing exceptionally or outside of that prescriptive mode to enhance the experience of that individual? And notice I didn't just say educational experience. I say the experience of that individual. And Dr. Jones, you brought up a question earlier about males and not having the male figure in the classroom. What we have to do from the higher educational perspective is to take a look at implementing and establishing programs that would engage, involve, recruit, and mentor more young African American males to train up as educators. Such as here at Southern University in New Orleans, we have the honorary program, which trains young men to become teachers. There's also a program called Call Me Mister with Claflin and Clemson in South Carolina, which encourages young African American men to major and receive degrees in education. So from our perspective, from our side, from our obligations, we also should have vested interest in bringing forward, designing and developing programs that would encourage more African American men to serve as educators.
I tell you this too, and there's a major misconception that within education that you cannot make a decent living to actually do what you need to do. And I think that's one of the biggest obstacles that we face, that if we can actually start communicating what's actually happening, I think you would find a lot more males willing to go into education. I'll give you a prime example. Our first year teachers start off in our organization making $44,000. If you're a social worker, you can potentially make between 55 and 60, right? Then if you become an administrator, what tends to happen, especially if you're in that position, you can make anywhere from 85,000 all the way up to six figure if you're doing your job with performance bonuses and everything. That's very compatible to a lot of other professions that are out there that's not really communicated on what can happen from an educational standpoint. So we have to use that as a plus to really start recruiting students who are in our universities who have no clue of what they would do. The reason I know that is because I was one who was originally majoring in education and thought I couldn't make any money in education, and I decided to major in finance, and now I find myself back in education. So it's kind of important to get the facts, the true facts of what's truly happening, and show examples of how we can do this. Or examples of bringing some, if we're recruiting African American students to be African American leaders, or be African American teachers, there's nothing more positive than bringing principals, African American teachers, African American CEOs in front of those students to show the possibility of what can happen.
I just had, actually,
2 or 3 questions.
you spoke on it.
No, you,
Okay.
and I'm saying, that over here, we had a question also.
Both of you kind of spoke on it, and my thing is I've worked in higher ed for over 15 years, and I've seen young men who have struggled to, they've graduated and they're really good students, but the tests, the teaching exams and things they've struggled with. And so one of the things I was wondering is how do we pull those young men who are truly the ones who are culturally competent, who truly can make those connections with the young men and still bring them into an educational environment. An example, I know a young man that was working in Chalmette as a football coach. But because he did more than just coach, he knew the grades, he knew what was going on in their homes, the principal actually hired him just as this person to be around the school. And literally that's what he did. He made connections with kids, pulled them into classrooms, went on field trips with them because he was really the one that had the ability to connect and to motivate and to really inspire the young students, although he wasn't in a classroom setting, not a counselor, not a social worker, but like you said, that coach that actually was able to connect. So how can we, or what can we do in education? I don't know what maybe you're doing already to encompass those young men who really have what it takes, but they may not have the credentials or the licensing to be able to get into the school or classroom
You
setting.
can encourage them into alternative certification programs, even though they may not have gone the traditional route of educating. Now keep in mind, what we've constantly said is, education, although we have curricula, guidelines, life is not prescriptive. So therefore, utilize alternative methods for educating those individuals. Because at the end of the day, what are we really trying to accomplish? Is it to teach for LEAP, iLEAP, Common Core, or is it to give that child, that young man, the tools and the competencies they need to live, to help their families, to provide workforce development? So therefore, we can incorporate alternative certification programs to assist that individual. And not just say, because you didn't pass praxis, your lifelong learning and what you bring to teaching this particular individual is invalid.
And I just think that even in the classroom, that people like that may not need to be in a classroom setting, that that's not where their strength. So even if they took the test, passed the test, got the certification, that's not their strength. And we have to create other avenues for those individuals to be able to get into the school.
Alternative certification and other methodologies of affording those individuals who truly have the desire to help those students. We have to find alternative ways to encourage them to continue to instill values into those individuals, the young impressionable minds.
Yes, ma'am.
I think everything you said is more than wordy. And I think as educators, this is where we fail. We do not take the time to talk about what you have just brought forth. We are caught up in Common Core, standards. We're judged by that. The schools have to perform. If I don't perform, I'm not going to have a job. And that's what's weighing on people. But the one sentence that struck home to me that you said was, statistically, our African American males are in a home led by whom? A female. Do you believe that every teacher has that at the forefront? They don't. They don't realize that. It's simple knowledge, but they don't realize that. And part of that problem is our fault because we don't take the time in the beginning of the school year when we bring a new teacher in, or even a teacher who's been teaching for 25 years, and bring that information to light. We make these assumptions like, you know, and I know we have some young teachers in here and teachers to be. Classroom management, when I was trained 30, 40 years ago, that was the thing. You had to control the class before you could teach. Well, we need to understand the population we're teaching before we can teach them. And I think that's the missing link. And I do believe we need more male role models. We need to have those programs. And Warren Bell with the Honore program and things like that on a higher level and try to encourage them. It's tough, but I think we got to change those mindsets because people still are in this mode of, oh, they can't. It's not going to be any better. We just need to move on. And
if you don't love them, then you can't teach them.
That's correct.
If they don't feel like you love them, they're not going to respond to you. It's just that simple.
And when you hire teachers, and that's what I do, when you hire teachers, it's got to be the package deal. You could be the 4.0 compass eval teacher, but if you don't love those kids, just like a doctor or a nurse, I don't want them in my schools. And that's, I think, what we have to do. And I think discussions and forums like this is what we need to bring at the opening of school to all of our teachers, whether they're the first year teacher stepping in the door, whether they're an alt-certified teacher, or whether they're the traditional teacher that's been teaching for 35 years.
Any other comment?
I just have a quick comment, or a quick question also. And I understand about the young men and the fathers and everything, but my concern is the young mothers. It's not just a single mother. She's so young. I have a parent who's 12 years older than her child, and she doesn't understand that he needs his education because he has to work. I have these bills to pay. You know, whatever she's concerned about is on him. He's the man of the house now. Well, he hasn't had a chance to be a child yet because he's forced into that. And that's most of my parents, the young single moms. That's a hard message to get across to them about the education because they haven't finished theirs. And for me to sit down, I have to sit down and actually talk with them first so they can understand what they have to do for homework. You have a few days, it's not due tomorrow. Start Friday, you have 2 weeks. Start the day I give it to you. And I give them step by step, written down information. Well, Mom can't read it. She doesn't understand the words of it, so I have to break it down for her first before I can even have the child do what he needs or she needs to do. And so how do we get that message across to the mothers, those young single mothers who unfortunately have...
Your panelists today are Dr. Clyde Robertson and Mr. Lawrence Jackson. Now, Dr. Clyde Robinson is actually the director of the Center for Africana Studies at Southern University, and he is a longtime educator. He is dedicated to the subject of African American studies. He's passionate about African American males. He is a staple in our society. And I'm very grateful to Southern University for allowing him to return to New Orleans after his trek after the storm. He was actually a professor at many colleges, and so his home and his roots are here. And Southern saw the value in Dr. Robertson, and so they decided to bring him on as director here. He actually is a father And he actually is someone that is passionate about not only his own children, but children in our immediate community and throughout the diaspora. I really admire Dr. Robinson, not only because of the work that he's done for Southern University, but just as a man himself. I've witnessed him in the community. His priorities are always focused on justice, and I'm just grateful that he decided to come and share a little bit about what he's passionate about, which is achievement, overall achievement, especially with males. And I'm grateful also for Mr. Jackson, who comes to us from Smothers Academy, a recent charter school in Jefferson Parish. But one distinction is that it is an all-male school. And it's one of the only all-male schools that we have in Jefferson Parish that are focused on males. And so I thought it was very apropos to ask him to come in and speak on this topic as well. So I think the combination of these two gentlemen will provide some invaluable information for us today. I'm going to ask them to speak to you today from two hats, as a father and then as an educator as well, because they do have experience in both of those areas. There are certain, there's a certain environment that that children have to become exposed to in order to move towards success. And so there's certain characteristics that successful students have been exposed to. I'm going to ask the panelists to just share their views on what it takes to raise a responsible male child in our current climate. They're going to speak to you from two different perspectives, but those perspectives are going to be very enlightening, I'm more than sure. So I'm going to allow them to respond if they so choose.
All right, no problem. No, Robinson, appreciate it. Yeah, I don't have as glowing of a resume or as glowing as a public persona as Dr. Robinson here, so certainly I'm appreciative and honored to be here on this morning. But what I do have is I've got the experience of being a father of a son who's now in college. I've got the experience of raising a daughter as well, so that's interesting to see both divergences there. I'm also an educator, and I've actually had maybe 100 and some odd plus children over the last several years that I had to deal with. This year I've got 55 young boys. I'm a fifth grade educator at Smothers Academy, where I teach them math and science. I serve as a science chair. I'm also pursuing graduate degrees and studies as well for education technology. So I've got some things I can add to the discussion here as well in my own right. Let me just say that one of the things that I find important for me personally in raising my son and having him take the pursuit that he's gone to and getting him through elementary and junior high and on through high school and on to college at this point is the fact that he had me as a role model. And I think that's key, and that is a key for providing some role model to place before our young men. One of the things I see that has broken down in our society today is the limitations that have been placed on the black family. It's broken down in a lot of instances because we have a lot of single parent households now, much more than we have had in the past. And that impact is being felt. The ripples are all the way through our educational system. It's all the way through our society. So what I think needs to happen is we've got to go back to that old time mantra of it takes a village to raise that child. And I agree with that wholeheartedly. Dr. Robinson and I were talking a little bit before you guys came in about that importance that you've got to find, and I think it's so critical that we find some way to place a positive male role model in front of our children, especially when there's not one present every day inside the home. Whether that be, and there's a stigma to that in some instances, because our black women are proud They work hard. They do what they do, and they do it well to keep their families intact and to survive. But we've got to recognize that sometimes that black boy needs that black male to give him some perspective and to give him some image that he can look forward to or look at to help him along the way. There's just some things that they're not going to tell you, Mom. Some things they're not going to want to talk to you about. They're going to shut down. You're going to see it as a shutdown, when in actuality it's just that they don't want to talk to you about it. And it's interesting because we see it every day in the classroom. I was in the other session over there and I had to let them know that, in schools today, we've got to be mama, we've got to be dad, we've got to be the social worker, we've got to be the intermediary, we've got to be the pastor, we've got to be all of these things to the kids before we can even try to be their teacher. These young men need to know that they can trust us before they will allow us to teach them. So we've got to reach out and we've got to be all things to all people. We've got to have that mentality as we move forward. One of the things that I provided for my son was the inclination for him to understand that he can do whatever he wants to do and he can be whatever he wanted to be. But it wasn't a pipe dream. I didn't sell that. I didn't sell the sports pipe dream, even though he played sports and he's on a football scholarship right now. What I sold to him was the impact of education in his life, and how he's got to get, my most favorite saying every day, bring me some grades. We've got to hold them accountable. And even today that they're in college, my most favorite saying is, bring me some grades. They know what that means. I still expect of them the high standards of achievement. And I think that's something that our parents can embrace as well as we try to bring our males forward. As far as responsibility of our black males, and I'll end it here, we have to understand that young men are going to try things, just like we all did. We all know what it was like when we were growing up. But one of the things that we had that they may not have now is that we had multiple individuals at multiple steps along our way who would step in and correct us as we grew up. That's missing now. So now what we've got to do is we've got to instill a sense of responsibility in our children and then have those kids and support them in that effort all the way through. We can't always get so focused on discipline that we miss the opportunity for growth. They're going to make mistakes, and that's cool. They'll make them. Sometimes we got to sit them down and talk to them instead of beating them half to death because they make a mistake. It's akin to the same thing in the classroom. I was recently reading on LinkedIn, one of my contacts posted an article, and the article, it struck me because it said for educators, we have to sometimes focus more on the lesson being learned than we do on the grade being produced. And that's true. We got to focus more on the learning. So I think that that's key even in our homes today. Focus more on the lessons being learned, not so much on the punitiveness of the grade that you would give them for how they responded in a particular situation. So that's my opening comment.
All right. Brother Jackson, I want to thank you not just for your pearls of wisdom that you just dropped, but for the profession you chose, because you could be doing any number of things. But you are a young black man teaching in our public school system, which is now in increasing numbers a rarity. Sister Carolyn, for your introduction, the check is in the mail. I'd like to pay homage to a sister with whom I worked closely in the school system, or I worked in the school system for 12 years, one of my supervisors, Sister Gertrude Ivory, who was truly a human being in an environment where there weren't very many. All right. I am not an expert in rearing males in general. I am a burgeoning expert because I don't believe in absolute expertism. I am a burgeoning expert. I am knowledgeable about rearing African American males. I have not reared, although I have influenced Caucasian males. I have not reared, although I have influenced Asian males. I have reared, not just my own, but others as well, African American males. I am an African American male. a man who was once a boy and who at 58, quickly approaching 59, I'm still alive and functioning, which is a tremendous accomplishment in this society. And so I am quite knowledgeable about that. First and foremost, African American boys have to learn to love themselves. They have to be taught to love themselves and all of their brilliance and all of the problems they may have. They have to learn to love themselves because society, it's not just the African American woman who has been set upon by the society, who has had to question their features and their existence. Black males have had the same struggles. And so as a result, we grow up not necessarily liking ourselves. And so not to question loving ourselves. So first and foremost, we have to love ourselves. I want to ask this question. The single mothers in the room, please raise your hands. The married mothers in this, please raise your hands. Because your struggle is real. Okay, all right. The fathers in the room.
All right.
Raise your hand. This is more than a job, as you well know. Keeping our children alive, whether they grow up in Pontchartrain Park, Eastover, or any of the myriad projects in this city and in this country, is a challenge. Keeping our children alive is the challenge. Once we have done that, keeping our children centered and healthy in mind, body, and soul is another challenge. And so having that male child love himself is the first step. In my opinion and in my worldview, teaching that man-child to understand who he is, whose he is, and where he is, and from whence he's come, is the next step. In the 1960s, somehow, my mother found a way. She became a part of a book club because she understood that her second son was a burgeoning black nationalist. As early and as young as I was enthralled by the Panthers. I was enthralled by the Republic of New Africa. I understand what was happening in Bogalusa and Jonesboro with the Deacons of Defense. I loved them. I loved weapons. And so I loved to fight. So my mother did something after she tried to break me of that. When she learned at 7, 8, 9 years old that I was not going to be moved, she did something as an educator that has really been the bulwark in my life. She found a way in the 1960s to become a part of a book club. I think it was through Ebony. And every quarter, books would arrive. Of course, not at the reading level of a 7 or 8, 10-year-old. But my mother sat with me, and my brother, she made my brother participate in this as well. She read with me books like Man-Child in the Promised Land. Black Like Me. If you know anything about that book, that is unique because it was a white man who paraded as a black man. In 1957, the book came out and the movie came out in 61. We read Soledad Brothers. We read Soul on Ice. We read all of these books because she understood my direction and she wanted me to be informed. And so she stressed a knowledge of self. Not only a knowledge of self, but a love of self and a love of those who looked like me. But in the process, she also taught me not to hate others who didn't look like me, because I was strictly on that road. Because the persons I fought weren't the persons I grew up with out here. In Pontchartrain Park, it was those in Gentilly Woods. I would cross the ditch willingly looking for a fight. And I would get fights quite often. And so she understood that for me to grow up healthy, I could not hate. And so she exposed me to the writings of Martin Luther King, with whom I was not very enthralled at the time. And so she taught me to love, or at least to like, or at least to tolerate. And so understanding oneself, loving oneself, and growing to tolerate at least, give respect to at least those who tend not to respect you. And therein is the next thing we must teach our young black boys. The respect of education. We must once again value education. Do you recognize one of the things I am as a certified historian? That's what I do professionally. I'm a historian. And after enslavement ended, people like Robert Russa Moton, whose name graces several schools across this country, including one here, but who was the actual first president of Tuskegee Institute. Booker Washington was the first principal of what was essentially a junior high school. In the 1920s, Robert Russa Moton elevated Tuskegee Institute into a 4-year degree-granting institution. Robert Russa Moton lived on a plantation soon after Reconstruction, and his mother, after a long day of work, would convert their cottage, slave cabin, into a school. And he said in his book, his biography, that people would rush into that slave cabin, thirsty for knowledge. Here in Louisiana, Lerone Bennett, the former great editor of Ebony Magazine and a publisher of innumerable valuable books, also talked about how after enslavement, Africans would rush into schools from sunup and remain until sundown, having to be whipped out of the classrooms because our knowledge and thirst for information and education was unquenchable. What happened? Particularly with our young men and in growing numbers, our young women. What has happened? That's not a rhetorical question. I actually know the answer. It all came in the 1960s with the Great Society, Lyndon Baines Johnson. Many of our problems. But our men in particular, our young boys in particular, have been turned away from the classroom as a metaphor for education. And so we have to grapple with this. Jawanza Kunjufu, in his seminal work, Countering the Conspiracy to Destroy Young Black Boys, introduces us to the third grade syndrome, which I was exposed to as well. I failed the third grade. And so it is in the third grade where our boys, who physically and also intellectually, up until that period, show signs of greatness and brilliance. What happens in the third grade? Well, America happens. The black male child, many times, according to Kunjufu and other studies I'm sure you're familiar with, are turned away and off from the process. And from that point forward, whether you're in public or private school, whether you're in New Orleans or New Roads or New York, the vicious cycle begins. And unless, as parents, we stand firm or as strong teachers, we stand firm, or as role models, we stand firm against the system, then what you see in the daily news, or maybe even next door, will continue. Which leads me to another point. Because of LBJ's Great Society, by and large, the black male has been removed from the home. The black man. Our young boys need role modeling. Brother Jackson touched upon this. And so Brother Jackson, myself, this brother, that brother, and I'm talking about black male role models. We must become more involved not only in our children's lives, and it's not just the black male, but in this case we're talking about the black male. We must become not only involved and sustainable in our children's lives, but in other children's lives as well. We must go beyond the comfort zone. That's including coaching on the Nord playground, participating in church or mosque or temple role modeling programs, rites of passage programs and the like. But we must develop more role models, and I'm talking about positive role models, not those negative role models which continue to plague our communities. We must stand against the tide which rushes our children into the penal system, or into poverty, or continued and sustained poverty, or the like. We must also develop early in our children's lives an involvement in community, civic, and political responsibility. I am not what you would consider a political. I, up until, recently, didn't see the value in politics because our black politicians have been ineffective, to say the least. But we see the results of not being active politically. We see the results. Right now, we're living in a state that was ravaged by an evil man. And we did not go out and vote during those elections we determined, we thought were insignificant. Now we see the merit of the dilemma that we find ourselves in. And so I have a whole list of these things, but for the sake of time, I'll allow Sister Carol to ask another question.
All right. Well, at this point, I'm actually going to defer for just a few moments to the audience and take input from the audience. I'll take maybe one or two questions to the panel.
My question is, where does a single mother find a role model that she can trust or put her child into the hands of a person, a male, that she doesn't know anything about?
Where does a single mother find an appropriate role model?
Yeah.
Okay, and I think I saw one other hand.
Well, that's one.
Can we take them one at a time?
Yeah, you're definitely going to take them one at a time.
Brother Jackson.
I'm going to get to you next, okay? So just hold that thought, whatever it is.
All right. Let me just say this first of all. There are resources available even in our community. There are certain nonprofit organizations that we utilize as mothers, that we utilize even in some of our churches, that can provide mentoring services for children, period, whether they are African American or otherwise. We are not an all African American school. We've got Caucasian, we've got Vietnamese, we've got Hispanic. So I'm teaching boys of all cultural backgrounds, but we provide the same services to them. My mother is here in the audience as well, and one of the things that, raise your hand there, Mom. Yeah. One of the things that we had as an advantage, she had a lot of brothers and sisters. I don't know why I'm an only child, but she had a lot of brothers and sisters. So I had uncles and what have you. I had.
Just so on that note, I hear you, but in some families they have more females in the home.
When you look, you don't see any uncles or godfathers, you know, and especially in this generation right here. And so my question is also, even though I don't have any males in the family, where do I turn to someone I can trust that's not a pedophile?
How old is your son?
Someone that, you know, I can put my son's life and, you know,
How old is he?
well, now they're of age now, but I was looking when they was young.
All right. Did they participate in, because NORD was extremely important when I grew up, it was a
As a single
lifesaver.
mother, I worked 5 days a week. That was a problem also for me, trying to find somebody to.
Well, in many cases, now I'm just going to add that you have mitigating circumstances that
Right.
might have prohibited you from doing a number of things. I was a NORD coach, and up until up until the storm, and I was sent away. When I was a NORD coach, many of my young men, many of their mothers were single mothers, and what would happen many times is that they would be dropped off at the park, Pontchartrain Park, at, let us say, 4:30. I wouldn't see them again until I dropped the children off at home. Pontchartrain Park at that time, we had a rule that the child, if the practice was at 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock, the child had to be picked up no later than 7. But that was just on paper. So what the coaches generally did, and 99% of the coaches were male, we then became those children's go-to guy. And then those children became interwoven with our children. And so not only during the week, and I coached baseball, but it's the same thing with the football coaches. In fact, my neighbor right now is a coach at Pontchartrain Park, and he is doing remarkably the same thing. So that's one area. The NORD playground became for us a magnet. Then you have the liberation churches. Dwight Webster is an example of a liberation theologian. This brother Jackson, I don't know what denomination he belongs to, but he's also a reverend. And I could tell, this is my first time meeting him, that he would be open to role modeling. What our colleges have to do, our institutions, what they have to do is do things similar to that, like coordinating rites of passages programs. I've just returned. This is my 9th week at SUNY. And so one of the things that I'd like to do is one of the things that I did under the auspices of Sister Gertrude, and that's to create at school sites culture camps and after school programs where the children will be introduced to cultural role models. In fact, years ago, before Katrina, we had a number of culture camps around the city. And several of the young men who are now stilt walkers here in the city and all over the country, and circuses all over the country, began to learn the process of stilt walking under the auspices of Shaka Zulu. And Shaka adopted many of those young men, culturally adopted them, became their role model, became their male role model. And now these young men are around the country, if not world, participating in that and making a lot of money and still walking and cultural performances. So these are the kinds of things that I think could have helped you when your children were of age.
And let me jump in one more time and just say this. There are several organizations in the area. NOLA for Life is one. You've got the 100 Black Men is another. You've got several organizations that are currently working directly with schools. So I would say the Silverback Society is another. You can talk to your school counselors. They are, even if they don't have a program in the school, we actually bring these community agencies into our school, and they actually, we've got offices set up on our campus, so we can refer directly, and they make connections with those students and the parents. But even if that's not present in your school, those counselors are constantly being bombarded by these organizations wishing to get into their school. So talk to your school counselors. They probably have some information that would help you with your mentoring, with your search for a mentor. Something else I want to bring up here too is the fact that when we are raising our kids, sometimes we've got to recognize the importance of talking to them. You know, we like to talk at them a lot, but we also need to have them and allow them to share their ideas. When I was raising my kids, my former wife now would always get upset with me because she would say, no, you talk to them too much. Well, I wanted them to have that dialogue. I wanted them to be able to express themselves, because that way that would help to build their confidence and help to build their thought processes. You know, we would always have these conversations, and then I would punish the heck out of them. Yeah, they would, but at least they would have a rationale. Why am I being consequenced? What's going on? And I do the same thing today, even in my classroom. When I give a consequence to a student, we have that conversation, you know, and it's all about, you know, what did you know, do you understand why I'm doing this? Okay, and let's make sure we get better at this, but you still have to serve your consequence. So talking to our kids and not so much at them. I'm reminded also of a poem that my mom used to always use. She's a career educator, taught kindergarten for lots and lots of years, early childhood development. There's a poem that says, children learn what they live. And it is so true all the way down. If a child lives with criticism, they learn to condemn. If they live with hostility, they learn to fight. If they live with ridicule, they learn to be shy. With shame, they learn to feel guilty. With tolerance, though, they can learn patience. So we've got lots of different, I advise you to look at that and look that up. You go on the internet and just type in, children learn what they live. It is so critical that we understand that the decisions we make in our homes and the approaches that we take to raise our kids and to interact with them make for a huge impact on their lives moving forward as well. The other piece that I heard someone mention, I think you might have mentioned it, is a concept of cultural competence. You know, one of the things we've got to understand is that even though, especially in our schools, as parents, we need to push our schools to make sure that they are training their teachers to respond to the cultural competency of our young men. What's happening is a lot of our young boys are being consequenced in schools. They're being put out. They're being put on suspension. They're being sent to in-school suspension. They've been all of these types of negative sent out of classrooms at a ridiculous rate. It's because the teachers don't know how to relate to them. So as a parent, get involved in your child's education. Get involved in that school. Don't just put that school on the bus and go to work and not care about what's happening at that school all day. Make sure you are making your presence known. You are so influential on the operations of that school. You don't recognize your power. So make sure you exercise your power. Get involved with your child's school. Get involved to the point where the educators know who you are, so that that child also knows, hey, if I mess up, if I act out, if I'm not serious, then somebody's going to tell my mama or somebody's going to tell my daddy. In addition to that, the young lady in the back was asking about what do you do when you don't have that male influence at home. And I know that that's a huge thing. I didn't have that male influence at home. But I think the fact that you stand strong, mothers, the fact that you recognize that as often as possible, watch your messaging. We have kids that'll tell you straight up, you know, they don't respect males at all. Why? Because they're too busy constantly hearing their mamas talk about their boyfriends, talk about their husbands, talk about this one, calling this one no good, calling that one no good, blah, 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 blah. And it makes the child have the impression that males are no good, even though they're one. So it makes it harder when you're trying to encourage that child to understand the value of respect for authority. It makes it harder when that child gets stopped by that police officer on the street, and an officer simply says, put your hands behind your back, and that child goes off on a tirade. It makes it harder when you've got, when you got your child that's being asked to follow a simple direction, but they are constantly combative. That leads to negative results. So we got to make sure we watch our messaging.
Thank you, and I think we have time for one last question. Did you want to get?
Yeah, I was going to ask, during your statement, you said it takes a black man to raise a black child. I think you're being ignorant on the fact that interracial relationships are growing more in today's society. So for me, what do you do when dealing with the ignorance in society when people don't believe a white male can be a positive influence for a black child?
No problem. Let me just say this first of all. I don't think I said that, but if I did, say again? Yeah, I don't think I was the one who said that, but in any event, let me just share this with you. I think that as a male, period, we have all grown up in a similar fashion. The culturalness of our upbringing does make a huge difference. Yeah. I don't think that it's impossible for a white male to raise a black child. I don't think it's impossible for a black male to raise a Vietnamese child. I don't think it's impossible for a mixed cultural race person to raise a Hispanic child. The issue is that you have to understand and meet that child where they are within their own cultural uniqueness. And I think that's the issue. Too many times what I do see, because we've got other issues going on now that we've got to actually fight with. We've got, in fact, you know, and believe it or not, even when I was teaching in the district schools, you've got kids that go home and they've got two moms. You've got kids that they go home, they've got two daddies. So even from that standpoint, it's not a matter of what the parent, I don't think it's really as important what the parental unit looks like as much as it is important of what messages the parental unit imparts to that child. Wisdom is wisdom. Doesn't matter where it comes from, doesn't matter the race of the person it comes from. But we've just got to be careful as we're raising our children to understand that they are impressionable. They are going to take on whatever we tend to give them from a standpoint of educating them on whatever level we educate them on. And we've just got to understand, if you have a minority child that you have adopted, there are some things culturally that you're going to have to make sure that child gets. Whether it comes from you or whether it comes from someplace else, they still have to get it in order to complete them as a whole.
Okay, and I want to allow Dr. Robinson to respond.
Now, there is an Essence Magazine article that I would encourage you to find and read. The title of it is Real Talk. What does it mean to raise a black boy? Now, the author of the article, which was in Essence Magazine, identifies white women who have begun the process of, and famous white women, Jolianne, something Jolie, Sandra Bullock, and these people. All right, now, Madonna. Okay. I agree with the Reverend to an extent. I have very good friends, Brother Rolf Barber, whom I taught and who's a member of one of my organizations, is of mixed race heritage. Frederick Douglass was of mixed race heritage. I mean, our community in the United States and worldwide are filled with people of mixed race heritage. Here's my point.
Ex-president.
Well, Barack Obama. Okay. Malafia Sante, with regards to the concept of Afrocentricity, suggests quite strongly that many people could be Afrocentric. Afrocentric is not necessarily race-based, but culture-based. If you, as a father of a black male child, as this man has just stated, immerse yourself into the culture of his African component, because depends upon how he looks. Depends upon how he looks. Society will not see you, but quite probably his mother. How does he see himself with regards to how he's going to be treated or how he's already treated? You must be prepared to counteract that which society throws on him. Because if you're not, that young man is going to be confused, and that young man will be quite probably torn asunder, if not outwardly, inwardly. The responsibility is yours now, as you are doing, as you're sitting in here. It's represented by the fact that you're in here. Reach out. Ask for assistance. because assistance is going to be required if your son looks like we do. Because this society, sir, is exceedingly anti-African, and especially anti-African male. Because black men, we can't argue that black men are put into prison for extended periods for things that white men are given probation for and not even brought into the police station. And so, when I said it takes a black man to raise a black child, it takes a black man who understands, because not all black men, as is evidenced by reality, not all black men have done a good job in raising a black child in this society. Now, if you were in Brazil, it might be a different discussion. But we are standing in the United States of America, which is built on the backs of your children, of your sons, people like him, who were continuously enslaved by their fathers. So, if you have a black child, please immerse yourself into the history of black people in this country and the world, and understand that which is required to bring them healthily into their future and to the rest of their lives.
Well, what you end up dealing with is, like and bouncing off of her, you get into a family where all they've had is females.
Yeah.
Being the only white male that comes into this, male at all coming into a kid's life, it's a whole different perspective to think in terms of why is he acting this way, why is he doing this way? I want to be a positive, but society doesn't think a white man can be a positive influence.
This is what happens sometimes. I'm thinking of my boy Rolf. Rolf's mother is British. Rolf's father is African American. And you've adopted a son.
Not yet. No.
Okay, all right. This is Rolf's biological mother. And there are times when Rolf and his mother meet at loggerheads because of just the racial reality of the fact that she lives her life as a white woman, he lives his life as a black man. And so there are certain realities that she just doesn't get. You are moving into this child's life at this particular stage of his life, not at 1 month, not at 1 day, but at 10, 12, 13, 14, 15. And so it might be very difficult for you to understand some of the problems that this young man is experiencing at this point in his life. That's why it's going to take, if you want to be successful, in my opinion, of course, you're going to have to get deep structured. This is what Malefi Asante calls becoming introspective. You're going to have to immerse yourself into that experience that this teenager, this preteen, this post-teen is experiencing. That's African American history, youth history, African American popular culture, and the like, to get some kind of grasp on what this young man is experiencing. And add on top of that, the fact that he may not know how to react around men, period, because he's had women in his life all of his life. Now, I know some hardcore women who may very well be greater authorities on certain aspects of rearing children than black men. That's why it's, I think, very, very healthy for us all to become as knowledgeable as I'm suggesting you become with regards to raising a black child. But you especially will have to bury yourself and then continue to communicate with that young man. Continue to communicate. Your learning curve, sir, will have to rise exponentially.
And let me say this too. It goes back to what I was mentioning earlier too about the fact that the messaging is more important that you give that child. So for instance, if you're in a mentoring relationship with a young African American male, I don't see any reason why you can't be effective in doing so. You're going to have to just recognize, and this is something I talk to people all the time about, you're going to have to just recognize that there are some things that you may not have had the experience of to be able to understand where that child's coming from. And if that child doesn't open up to you about that, then it's going to be up to you to figure out ways to get them to respond. So I don't think that you can, that necessarily you would be unsuccessful. But I do think, as Doc and I have both commented, that it's going to require you to really understand from a cultural standpoint where that child is, what the experiences have been, and where you can somehow shore up some of that belief system so that you can impart some wisdom into that child that goes beyond just surface level, but actually goes into and impacts that child's experience.
There are some books that I would suggest. I know some of you have these books. They're easily read books and easily accessible. Juwanza Kunjufu. And back when I was in the system, I brought Juwanza Kunjufu here to the city. Juwanza Kunjufu, one book, Raising Black Boys, that's the title. Raising Black Boys. The other, and I mentioned this because I was caught up into this syndrome, Countering the Conspiracy to Destroy Young Black Boys, Volumes 1 and 2. Countering the Conspiracy to Destroy Young Black Boys, 1 and 2, Volumes 1 and 2.
Who was that by?
Juwanza Kunjufu. Kunjufu, Kunjufu. Juwanza Kunjufu. His books can be found at the Community Book Center. And if any of these books are not there, then Vera or Mama Jennifer will certainly get it for you. The first, Raising Black Boys. It's 1. 2, Countering the Conspiracy to Destroy Young Black Boys, Volumes 1 and 2. The third, Motivating Black Youth to Work. Motivating Black Youth to Work. There's a fourth book, and I think this is his most recent, Keeping Black Boys Out of Special Education. Keeping Black Boys Out of Special Education. And there's a fifth book. I encountered this one during the latter stages of my tenure in the school system. This is around 2005. Black students, middle class teachers. Black students, middle class teachers. These are books by Juwanza Kunjufu. There are scholars, I'm trying to think of the brother's name, who's a tremendous Afrocentric psychologist. I can't think of his name right now. But these books, I think, they're easily readable. They're not written in using scholarly text and terms. They're written in everyday language by an expert out of Chicago, Illinois.
The third book you said?
The third book, Motivating Young Black Youth to Work. Motivating Young Black Youth to Work. So these are books that we all should have in our libraries and can certainly be beneficial in our efforts to keep our children alive and get them ready for the 21st century and beyond.
Right. Good afternoon, everyone. We hope you are enjoying your lunches. And right now, what I'm going to do is introduce to you our committee member from St. Tammany Parish Public Schools, Ms. Sharnetta Robinson. She's going to give you an introduction to our guest speaker for the afternoon. Dr. Sharnetta Robinson is going to speak to us a little bit about Representative Haynes Smith. And All right. I'm going to allow her to come before you and give you a few brief words about Representative Haynes Smith. Okay, Sharnetta Robinson, I'm going to turn it over to her.
Thank you. Representative Patricia Haynes Smith is a native of Baton Rouge and is well known here and throughout Louisiana for her tireless effort to champion causes she believes in. She has been a force for improving education in public schools in East Baton Rouge Parish and the state. Smith is a former two-term president of the EBR School Board. Recently re-elected without opposition, Representative Smith is currently serving her third term in the Louisiana House of Representatives and has served 2 consecutive terms as chair of the Louisiana Legislative Black Caucus. Representative Smith serves on the Appropriations, Education, Joint Legislative Committee on the Budget, and Municipal, Parochial, and Cultural Affairs Committees of the legislature. She has many appointments, including the Select Leadership Committee, and serves as Vice Chair of the House Executive Committee. Her awards are too numerous to list here, but include the first Martin Luther King Distinguished Leadership Award in Politics, the Fannie Lou Hamer Political Award from Grambling University, and she was the recipient of the Noble National Organization of Elected Legislative Women's Highest Award, 2014 Women of the Year. Representative Patricia Haynes Smith is married to Freddie Smith Jr. They have 6 children and 12 grandchildren. Join me in welcoming our keynote speaker for the afternoon, Louisiana State Representative for District 67, Representative Patricia Haynes Smith.
Thank you for that brief introduction, and I'm pleased to be here. I want to thank Carol Alexander Lewis and the Parent Magazine, SUNO, and everyone else who has given me the opportunity to speak to you today on a subject that I am quite passionate about, and that is education. I want to thank the parents, the grandparents, and all of the presenters and everybody that's here today, because this was well thought out. We've been working on it for a couple of months. I should say more than a couple of months, but through conversations on the phone and pulling it together, so I'm glad to see the forum come to fruition. You know, I know everyone in this room has a genuine concern about education in the state, and while we may not always agree on the pathway to get there, we all want to see the same end result, and that is to ensure that all children have a successful educational journey from pre-K through 12 and beyond. We have to begin to change that paradigm and shift to adding additional kids, and that's the 0 to 3 in the learning process, because the statistics now show that learning begins in the womb, totally in the womb. This summit has covered a plethora of data to empower parents and to provide opportunities for you to hear from experts on up-to-date information on educational research and just genuine educational opportunities. And I know that you have some great takeaways from what you heard. I want to digress for just a minute. You know, when I was introduced, I was told, you were told that I was served on as chair of the Black Caucus. I don't know if many of you remember, but during that period of time, there was a move in the legislature to merge SUNO with UNO. And I know those who teach here probably do. Well, I was one of the lead folks to make sure that that didn't happen through the Black Caucus involvement. And I want you to know there are still people talking about trying to do that, even right now in the legislature, because so many of them feel that as they look at SUNO's graduation rates, that it doesn't fit in. And I'm always the one to step up and say that SUNO has a graduation rate of what you see, because they cannot count all of the students in their graduation rate, because many of them are part-timers, but they're completers. And if you look at the completers, then you have a good number for graduation rates for SUNO. So I want you to know that. I really want to talk a little bit about the crisis that I feel is in education in Louisiana. A recent survey that, if you read the Advocate and other papers, showed that in various quality of life putting Louisiana against other states, we ranked 46th in education out of 50. We've been at the bottom of those lists for some time, and I believe that there are a number of reasons why we fall there. We also fell 45th in health care, and that was shown before the Medicaid expansion happened. Now, I know that we can all look back at our own educational journey and say, how did we get to where we are? Because we all have different journeys to get there. And I'm going to date myself by telling you that my journey included going to segregated schools, parochial and public. But I received a fantastic education. And I know that there were other students struggling in the classes, but they were helped by others and by teachers. We all had high expectations and were destined to success in whatever it was we chose to do, whatever success was for that individual. Some became skilled tradesmen, learning from the other segregated unions that we had at that time, for them to go on and follow in the footsteps of their families. In education, our accountability measures was a CAT test, California Achievement Test, end-of-course test that you took, and a teacher grading you on whether or not you could go from one grade to the other. And we were not compared only to other schools, but we compared just the schools that were in our area. And some of these practices followed during desegregation, except that many African American students began to be left behind during desegregation. Traditional public schools continued using the same measures for some time to determine where students were successful or not. And during this period of time, of course, we had a lot of white flight. And that caused the creation of many private and parochial schools that were not open to African American children, especially in southern states. So many studies have been done on African American children in an attempt to pinpoint why were these children left behind? Why is there such a wide academic achievement gap for African American students and others? Research has been done, but no definitive answers have come forward. Let's fast forward now to 1990s, where eliminating the achievement gap was top of mind for a lot of educational researchers. Accountability standards began to pass. The buzzword was high-stakes testing, and school systems across the country had not implemented any positive changes, any positive things that they could do to eliminate suspensions and expulsions for African American students, as well as how they were going to deal with the achievement gap. Yet the push for districts to become accountable came in the form of states developing their own tests, and I know many of you realize that, instead of using the CAT test and other measures. Parochial and private schools didn't have to use that. Many of them still use the CAT test and others, but not the tests that were used in public schools. Along with these new ideas came No Child Left Behind, which set out certain standards for certain groups of students and how they were succeeding in school. And then a change came again. It opened the door for Common Core, and now we have ESSA. School districts couldn't keep up with all of the changes and caused chaos, not only with children being left behind, but also with teachers. So states began to divert money into school choice programs such as charters and vouchers. And while Louisiana is fully engaged in the school choice movement, there are still some problems and some groups that are not fully on board. Now, the governor and I were elected together in 2007, and we served both on the Education Committee until his rise to governor. We did attempt, and had many opportunities to attempt, to point out the concerns that we had for the reform package that was passed in 2010. And there's still, and we had no, of course it was to no avail, we still have some unlevel playing fields with the reforms, but it becomes more difficult to get changes passed. Folks who support these reforms, many times they're supporting them without looking at some root causes that prevent all students to succeed. And then I believe they're doing a disservice to the many children who are still lots of children being still suspended and expelled, and really not trying to eliminate the gap, the achievement gap. You know, we have pre-K children being expelled from school, suspended from school, and that, to me, is unconscionable. For that younger child to be suspended or expelled from school. And I heard someone say when we talked about that, you know, but some of them, they need to be expelled. I said, no. And these are legislators. And I said, no. When a child is that young and they have a behavior issue, then it's inherent upon the teacher and the parent to get together to determine why the child is acting out. But suspension and expulsion is not the answer. You know, we've made so many changes to our educational system. It's really hard to stabilize not only the children learning, but teachers teaching. And you know, if all of the legs to a stool are all in place for a child, then you would not have to just move a child from one place to another, because that doesn't rectify the problem. Children still live in impoverished neighborhoods which indicate there's a disconnect between the cities and school districts. This has got to change. Communities have to become involved, and I know hopefully many of you in your communities are involved in making changes to the societal ills that plague our neighborhoods. True, there are many children who can overcome these issues. They move out of those neighborhoods, and they go on to be quite successful, but the vast majority just can't. And we waited too long to come back to putting career options in our schools. We've waited too long. We've lost too many children who've dropped out of school because we did not implement opportunities for them to have career choices once they graduate. Now we're doing it, and I'm so glad we are. We've also not funded enough pre-K programs, which we know are the foundations for early success. We don't fund K-12 to the fullest, and there are some who even right now today, when we go back on April 10th, will be looking at how can they cut the MFP, and how can they cut other funding to education. That's really unfortunate. We've already cut higher ed, putting more of the burden on families and their children for their children to obtain a post-secondary degree. And I say all of that to go back to what I feel we should be challenging our school systems and our legislators to look at. Early childhood learning, 0 to 3. Investing in quality early childhood programs is the first step in improving educational outcomes for young children. Presently, we do have a school readiness tax credit that incentivizes child care facilities to begin to teach pre-K and kindergarten readiness skills. We must locate sustainable funding, a sustainable funding source for early childhood learning. Expanding pre-K, that's the beyond 3, up to 5, some say up to 3rd grade. Louisiana, we have a number of pre-K programs, actually 4-year-olds. Funded by the state is LA4. Various school districts have pre-K programs funded with $8G. We have Title I programs, but non-public schools, early childhood development programs, and we have Head Start. And at one time, folks, you know, TANF, if you remember what TANF dollars are? Yeah. Our LA4 was funded totally by TANF in order to fix the budget. They took money from TANF and funded LA4, which meant it was being funded only by federal dollars, not by state dollars. Fully funding our MFP as traditional public schools and other charter schools grow, it is imperative that we fully fund the MFP. School districts face too many mandates that cut into the funding that they receive, such as retirement and health care. These laws affect our traditional school districts, but not charter schools. Due to budget constraints, the MFP has been frozen for the last 2 budget cycles. These are just a few items that I think we should concentrate on in the state and part of my wish list, but we should all know that everything I mentioned takes money. Our governor is committed to early childhood expansion and public schools, and I'm sure that if the dollars were there, we would definitely do just that. There are many legislators that also support this, and my guess is that if we do, we'd be on the right track. I spoke a little earlier about the research about brain development, and I recently participated in the NCSL's Early Learning Fellows Program, which concentrated on early childhood education. I was thoroughly impressed, and I just had a conversation with the young lady who presented today. The brain research, how many of you attended that session? The brain research and how learning begins in the womb. Mothers bonding with their babies while in the womb actually starts the learning process. That bonding is crucial to children having an expanded vocabulary prior to entering a pre-K program. And we all know the impact that reading has on your child. Reading to them while they're in the womb, talking to them while they're in the womb, playing music for them while they're in the womb. You've got to also look at our young parents. We've got to teach them to put away the electronics. Not talking to their babies in baby talk. Talk to them in adult talk language. And I say that because our children, African American children, go to school with a vocabulary of 5 times less than other children to attend pre-K programs. 5 times less. Now we've got to realize it. That means they've got a long, long way to get caught up on looking at sight words and all of the vocabulary words they need to know. If you're here, parents, I know you probably, I'm telling you things that you already know, preaching to the choir. But as your child's first teacher, you have to be engaged in your child's educational journey. You've got to make sure to pass on what you know of Learn Here to other parents, helping them to ensure that their child or their children receive the best education that they can get. And I applaud you for coming out today and to continue to support our children as I do. Be empowered, but also be knowledgeable. Be committed to quality education for all children. Thank you.
I hope you've had a good session or sessions, and I'm hoping that when you leave here today, you've maybe met some new acquaintances and gotten some more information that you can utilize. And just remember, SUNO can make or break this community. We're here to make it, with all of you working toward making this community the state, the nation. Because as Dr. Mims Devison said this morning, we not only have people in Louisiana, we have them throughout the United States. And what they're doing, the accomplishments they're making, it is just marvelous. And so you touched on something that I want to hit on. We are mandated as for having people to be completers in a 4-year process. But many people take longer than 4 years. But I attest to you that when they walk across that stage and they get their diploma, they're a completer. And I don't give a pardon this French, damn what the other people say about it. We're completers, all right? Because I become impassionate when I work with people who have been here 5 and 6 years, holding down 2 jobs, working, doing 6 or 9 hours, and still staying at it. And we can't complain. We can't have them as a completer because we don't meet the 4-year requirement. Who's in charge around here? And I think we need to upset the political apple cart and say, let educators take care of educating, and let the politicians take care of politics. But education and politics have been merged, but we've got at least one sensible human being out there letting them know what the real story is. And this time I'd like to turn the session over to Carol Alexander Lewis, and with the final note. I'm sorry about that, but I'm passionate, okay?
What a powerful message. What a powerful message. Let's give Representative Smith another round of applause. I'd like to thank her for her passion and dedication and for her voice in the wind. We just want to make sure that she realizes that there are individuals out there who are supportive of her vision. And we are thankful for her coming today to share that vision with us. As a follow-up to our events on today, we are actually going to conduct monthly conference calls, monthly follow-up sessions as a way for you to remain connected. We don't want to provide this valuable information to you without an opportunity for you to remain connected and to go forth and actually do good work. So what we're going to do is make arrangements based on all of the attendance information you've given us today and arrange to have follow-up sessions for you. We are also planning another session, another event in November with the National Alliance of Black School Educators. And so I'd like to invite you all to that and let you know that we'll be communicating with you to let you know about that in case you'd like to attend. It's going to be a similar opportunity. Okay? All right. And so I think Dr. K gave us some great closing remarks. Thank you for that. We're going to have some voluntary focus groups if we have anyone who wants to sort of meet with us at the end of the session to sort of talk about topics that they'd like to see in our follow-up events and just to provide input back and forth. We'll have an opportunity for those who would like to participate in that. But with that, I'd like to bring...
Where will that be? Will that be sitting at these round tables here?
Yes.
Coming out with focus?
Yes, it will. Okay. With that, I'd like to ask the members of the committee who are still here to come forth for just a moment. I'd like to recognize them. I'd like you guys to see what the committee looked like, because it does take more than one person to put off this type of event. I'd like to have Dr. Bacchus, Joyce Duncan, Victoria, all the members of the steering committee. I'd just like you to see them, and I'd like to publicly acknowledge them. And of course, our illustrious one of our first members, Representative Patricia Haynes Smith. Okay? All right. Thank you. So we just want to, I'll turn it over to Dr. K to adjourn, but I just want to thank everyone for attending on today, and hopefully we'll see you at our follow-up activities guided by your input. Thank you.
Good job. Hold it, hold it. And anybody else need to get a group shot? Get it while you can. That's good, thank you. You got it?
And we'd like to have Dr. Bacchus' class to come up. These students were actually involved in a panel discussion on today. So I'd like to recognize them. They actually served as presenters today. So this is their first conference that they participated in. Dr. Carson and her students as well. If her students are still here, we'd like to thank them for their input on today as well.
Okay, line up and look toward the camera. Aim this way. If you can't see the camera, we can't see you. So
Okay, camera. You okay, Dr.
if you can't see the camera, we can't see you.
Dr. Carson.
Come out, spread out, get your face in there, and okay. Look over here, hold it, and kind of look all the same direction. And there you go. That's the idea. Except for the person that's looking in the opposite direction. There you go. Okay. All right. Everybody else got your shot?
Yeah. All right, we got this one, Dr. Hey, go go ahead. Come on, the rest of y'all.
Get some more?
Yeah, we got rain. Come on.
Maybe put some chairs. Maybe have them sit with chairs in front of them. Pull your chairs out, yeah.